Hi guys, I'm Wilson Scribe and as part of an inside look at E-League and Face its Overwatch Open, we're actually sitting down with a member of the casting desk. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Wilson. Thanks for having me. My name's John Sargent, also known as Jorosar, and I was one of the casters, I guess, from start to finish to playoffs of the Face It E-League Overwatch Open. And before then, some of you might recognize me from StarCraft 2, which I do still cast from time to time.
Awesome. So tell us a little about yourself. So what do you do besides casting?
So that's quite potentially a long-winded question. So to start at the beginning, when I was at university, I was aiming to become a Formula One engineer and successfully became an F1 engineer for Lewis Hamilton, actually, back in 2007. That was a lot of fun. But shortly after that, I decided to go my own way and go into business. So I spent 6 to 7 years doing e-commerce and business in my spare time, and I was quite successful at that. And it also gave me a lifestyle where I could travel or do stuff in my just in my time off. And coincidentally, during this was when StarCraft: Wings of Liberty was released. And back then, the scene in terms of StarCraft 2 was still very young. I really enjoyed watching YouTube videos, and some of the casts that I saw all the way back then, I thought, oh, I might be able to do better than some of this. Let me give it a go, and started casting to YouTube. And from that, I began casting 3 nights a week for an organization known as Playhem TV. There are some names in the esports scene who had their roots back in Playhem. Sham2, for example, was in Playhem. Frodan was one of my colleagues in Playhem. Robin, who is now at Blizzard, is at Playhem. And there are 5 or 6 more names. Zoya as well, who still casts Heroes of the Storm. So all sorts of names associated with esports. We once cast StarCraft 2 together, and it was a lot of fun. And off the back of that, I did a lot of StarCraft live events, especially in 2012 and 2013. So your IEMs, your DreamHacks, your Blizzard World Championship Series, I believe the IPL 5 Finals as well, which was a fantastic event. And yeah, all sorts of fun and games. So I've been in and around casting for just under 5 years now. And I've been juggling that at the same time with a full-time job. So in 2013, I went into digital marketing formally because it also, believe it or not, it's just an area that I was particularly passionate about. And I really quite enjoyed learning. So since then, I've been juggling a full-time job with my casting career, and I've obviously gone through all the StarCraft expansions. I enjoy playing other games on the side as well. I love racing games, and I do Hearthstone on YouTube, for instance. But Overwatch was really the game that I would have picked up, probably the first one since StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, to be honest with you, where as soon as I looked at the game, as soon as I played it for the first time, I thought, wow, I can really be in love with this. And I just enjoyed it so much that I knew I had to get into it. The only game I've technically ever played competitively was CS 1.5 back when I was in high school, and I actually stopped playing CS like seriously all the way back in 1.6. So it was interesting to come back to a shooter game, but with all of the added dynamics that Overwatch has with all the different heroes and abilities, and I just really fell in love with it. So since then, I've been doing as much casting as I can be for Overwatch. And most recently, as you know, of course, I was at the Face It E-League Overwatch Open. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of sort of where I originally was outside of casting, more or less to today. I do other as well. I play chess competitively and organize tournaments in London on the side. But mainly what I do with my spare time now is gaming and esports when I can.
Well, that's awesome. It's obviously a great synopsis of kind of your career leading up to now, and I think there's a lot people can take away from that. But so with all these outside influences, whether it be engineering, whether it be digital marketing and stuff like that, how do you really kind of incorporate that in kind of your entire brand as a whole? Do you feel like some of the aspects of certain parts of your life actually flow over into others, or do you feel like you can apply certain aspects you learned in like your past careers to kind of help you out currently?
I think the biggest influence on casting, surprisingly, isn't necessarily on camera work. It probably has a lot to do with being used to dealing with people and almost emotional maturity when dealing with people in organizations. A lot of people in the gaming world, for better or for worse, are people that don't necessarily have that much. I'm going to call it real life experience, but really that's in inverted commas. I mean, any experience is experience these days. But being able to deal with clients, bosses, colleagues, people who report into you on a day-to-day basis allows you to have those professional level conversations with people in the esports industry, where especially on the talent front, sometimes you have some people who are really fantastic on the mic and are fantastic talent and are really good, but don't necessarily possess the life experience to be able to handle these kind of professional relationships. So I think that is the one biggest area of difference, I would say. Uh, like basically working full time up till now has probably helped me in my esports career. It just makes so much of a difference when you're able to get on with everyone and enjoy a good professional relationship.
Yeah, so expanding on that, not just from a casting point of view, in terms of esports in general, obviously there's that huge gap between kind of success, like from a specific audience streaming on Twitch, and obviously converting that success over into mainstream success, more in terms of being on television or being like, have live broadcasts in that aspect. Where do you feel that esports really needs to kind of like work on to make that jump? You mentioned a little bit about, kind of having the life experience, but in terms of other aspects, what do you think?
So I think a lot of aspects when it comes to esports production are already there. You take a look at events like the International, for example, and the level of value and content production is absolutely phenomenal. It can very easily be broadcast on any TV network with pride, in my opinion. There will always be small things that everyone can improve, but the basic product, I think, is already there. Um, where esports needs to improve, well, maybe not necessarily improve, but go along the right track, probably jumps a little into my previous point about just professionalism and dealing with people who aren't necessarily that digital, who aren't savvy to esports. We need to be wary that when we go into mainstream TV, we'll be dealing with plenty of people who, in their professional careers, won't have dealt with esports before. And they want to be able to see esports as another vehicle to be able to market, to be able to give the viewers enjoyment and what they want to watch. And for them to do that, they want to work with people that they're comfortable with, that they know that they're going to be able to produce a good product with and work alongside. So part of that life experience and professional working with other people answer that I gave previously, I think extends a lot into how esports can work with traditional TV and other forms of media moving forward. I don't think there's actually a big gap. I think we just need to do more of it because if you looked at esports some amount of time ago, you could almost argue that, well, esports is great watching, but it feels like you have really professional TV guys sort of dealing with a group of nerds. I don't know how far you have to go back, but I'm pretty sure at some point that was true. And now we're moving on to a level where, actually, in terms of professionalism and dealing with those relationships, they're more or less on par. And as a result, I think esports owes a lot to that in terms of being able to bring it mainstream. So, do we have to do an awful lot more? Maybe in some areas, but I think we're already ticking a lot of the boxes that we need to tick to make the transition into mainstream.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And if you look at even events, I think like Evo 2015, 2016 was actually broadcast on ESPN, and they had the entire schedule organized for that. So I definitely think, I mean, it's already happening in some aspects. I think it's more about converting the entire operation actually over to, I guess, give us more opportunities in different esports games to definitely be exposed to a larger audience. So speaking of kind of
Absolutely.
like, yeah, so sorry. So speaking in terms of that, I know a lot of casters do a lot of prep before like a week's cast or before a day's cast. Can you take us through your preparation process?
So to take a look at most recently, for instance, at the Overwatch Open, between weekends, for instance, a lot of our prep or a lot of my prep would go into taking a look and seeing if the teams in question that were playing were actually scrimming or playing against each other during the week in other cups. A lot of Overwatch at the moment as well, because teams are currently rather volatile, also involve team changes and taking a look at who is what rosters have changed, what teams have been rebranded, who has picked up who. But a lot of it as well is talking to the pro players when you can, trying to get a feel of what they think. in terms of scrimming results or where they see their opposition as being at, and how confident they're feeling about the upcoming matches. As much insider information as you can gather, the better. And that combined with watching VODs and finding out how teams are doing during scrims, mostly made up our weeks in between the weekends of the Overwatch Open. Because obviously, with the casting schedule being basically every weekend for 6 weeks, I think minus one where I was moving house actually, there wasn't actually an awful lot of time for us to prepare. So it was pretty important that we got our prep work spot on during the week.
Yeah, and that makes sense as well. Obviously, going into a cast, I think there's a lot of different aspects you have to look into, and there's definitely a lot of behind the scenes work a lot of people don't know. So you've obviously told us a lot that that I didn't know about behind the scenes, and maybe some other people didn't know. But obviously, Twitch chat knows everything. So what would be something you could tell Twitch chat or the Reddit community about something they don't know goes behind the scenes?
They don't know. Oh, well, the Helix fossil isn't actually the answer to everything, but it does know a pretty good amount. Um, Behind the scenes, it's very tricky because a lot of what chat sees is I think you phrased the question quite well in that it's a complete polar opposite. But you could almost pick any topic, and and there would be something that the viewing audience would never know that as professionals we have to pick up on. So to go for an organizational example, there might be certain reasons for downtime that involve broadcasting schedules or one of the teams having a bit of an emergency, or any one of a number of things where we wouldn't just come out and say it and keep everyone informed the same way we would on an online cup, especially if we're being simultaneously broadcast on TV. It's always very tricky to understand what we want to be broadcasting and what we don't, and what information we give, and it's not always as simple as yes, let's just full transparency, give us all the information at once. Other less organizational issues could be to do with technical issues in the studio. I think there was once during one week where one of the monitors in front of the caster went out halfway through a game, and I believe I forget who I was co-casting with at the time, but I think one of us missed a reasonably important engagement because there was a 5 second period where neither of us got to see too much about what was going on while we repositioned ourselves. And chat, I believe to this day, never actually knew that that's what happened in the studio. It's the kind of thing that you pick up with and move on a daily basis. And if you think about the sheer number of things going on in a studio environment and the number of bits of equipment that can break or can malfunction mid-cast, it's actually pretty incredible that they're able to pull that sort of thing off anyway in the first place. So I think chat might be used to casual streamers and a lot of people that broadcast online cups where there are far fewer rules. You can almost say what you want, show on camera within reason, whatever you want, and just generally enjoy yourself. The same level of transparency isn't necessarily available when you're picking up the level in terms of a professional broadcast. So that there are a million and one different things going on behind the scenes at any one time that people at home, in an ideal world, will never find out because we're able to identify the problem, fix it, and continue broadcasting while it's all invisible to the audience.
Yeah, and expanding more off kind of like the audience role in all of this. Obviously, I think it would be fair to say that there has been some flack directed towards the casters, at least especially at the ESL Atlantic Showdown, where some people were just not so happy about the level of casting being done. In terms of just a personal experience, have you ever had someone like from the community tell you something and you actually took it to heart and were like, actually, that's a really good suggestion and made changes, or has it always been like taking everything with a grain of salt?
All the time. I think um, I am quite an emotional person, and I tend to take both positivity and negativity, pardon me, to heart a lot of the time. I found that out in my StarCraft 2 days, and I adjusted my casting to take account of this. So I'm not, for example, scouring Reddit for feedback after a cast or anything like that. The most important things that I look out for are feedback from my peers and feedback from the people I'm working for or with. And I make exceptions to that because when I say all the time, I mean individuals will pick up on, oh, you said this, but do you want to take a look at the VOD and see if this might be phrased better next time, or we noticed when you were with this caster, you did X, Y, or Z. And I had people reaching out to me on my Facebook fan page, on Twitter sometimes as well, because my DMs are open, and then like pointing out a couple of these things where I thought, actually, this is really useful, constructive feedback. Thank you very much. And I will act on it more or less on the spot if I think it's worthy of my attention. I'm not in a position of luxury where I'm able to either cast or play games 8 to 9 hours a day because I'm casting in my spare time. So whatever feedback I get, I need to internalize, understand what I need to do, and act on it. In theory, a lot quicker than some professional casters might have to, in order to basically stay good at what I do. So I do receive feedback like that all the time. But what I would say is anything that resembles, I don't know, like let's say negativity towards casters in mob mentality, yes, they might have a point, but that's usually not the correct way. In fact, almost always just not the correct way to raise up an issue with someone's casting. It's one of the most negative and difficult ways to provide feedback. And the usually it doesn't really result in good things being done. It just makes people feel bad and occasionally gets someone removed from something, but it doesn't actually take the right positive steps to solve a problem. So I know there have been events where the casters have gotten some flack. I've certainly had a lot of flack throughout my career, especially when I was starting out with StarCraft. And I think it's very important to learn early on how to separate positive, constructive criticism from just negativity. And then over time, you'll notice the positive, constructive criticism becomes more detailed, more nitpicky, more specific to something that you did that you might not even realize you're doing. And that's how you know you're getting the broader things and the more basic things about your casting spot on. And now people are noticing more of the little things. Like to me, that represents progress.
Okay, awesome. So let's expand more onto E-League and Face It. From a production side point of view, what do you think the Overwatch Open is doing well?
I think the Overwatch Open had a little bit of rocky week one. We had a number of technical issues in the studio that people might not have seen, but one of the obvious ones, which I think is fair to call out, is the lack of a ticking down countdown timer, which we originally had prepared, but basically ran into errors just before we started week one. And there was a lot of feedback to process between weeks 1 and 2. And to my surprise, well, no, not even to my surprise, more like I'm proud of the guys that not only did they band together to take a look at what the feedback was and act on it straight away, by week 2, basically all of the feedback from week 1 had been acted on. They were proactive in, rather than taking a look at like mob mentality, they were reaching out to Reddit and finding out what actually needed to be done. We were talking to other professional casters as well, and they more or less overhauled half the show from a technical point of view for the second week and did a bloody brilliant job of it. And I feel like they continued from strength to strength week after week. And it got to a point where if something was actually going wrong, it almost didn't matter anymore because they had dealt with stuff that was so much more difficult to deal with in the past that it was water off a duck's back and they were just able to fix anything that came their way. So I thought it was a very versatile team that they had there. And by the end of the Overwatch Open, it felt like short of the entire studio collapsing, there wasn't very much that could happen for these guys to stop what they were doing, which is just excellent.
Yeah, no, and that's obviously awesome to hear in terms of production value. Transitioning from, I guess, the broadcast or production that's being currently hosted on Twitch to transferring that over to the Turner Broadcasting system and TBS as a television channel. What do you think are the major steps that a lot of streaming platforms need to make in order to become more applicable on like the television broadcasting?
I think the fundamental difference between esports broadcasts and television broadcasts is the linear scheduling. On a TV station, you know what's coming on an hour from now, 2 hours from now, 3 hours from now, and you'll see that when esports tournaments and the like schedule things in this way, that you end up inevitably with a lot of downtime if any particular match runs on, and that's always going well, at least in the short term, I think that's going to be the number one biggest difference. It's very difficult for an event to hold a TV station, for instance, on its own for an entire day, unless the breaks between games or matches themselves can be kept relatively short. And what you don't want is a situation where, well, it's fine. You just start the next game when the first one finishes, and it's okay to a point where your broadcast accidentally ends an hour or two earlier than you would otherwise expect, which of course is a major no-no in the world of television. So I think there are some bridges that we still need to cross, some gaps that still need to be filled. A lot of this will come down to, in my opinion, developing the storylines within esports. For example, in Overwatch, taking a look at the teams. I kind of want to say producing VTs, but actually deeper than that, it's got more to do with developing the storylines, following teams around, and giving the audience at home the opportunity to truly understand where a team has come from, and what their story is going into a broadcast tournament. Because the frequency and length of those kind of, I'll call them filler assets, will actually help you space out a lot of your broadcast so that you can actually be more compliant with viewing schedules. But if you do those filler assets in such a way that each time you show them, it's actually a real plus and a real bonus to the viewers watching at home because it's providing really good value for them, I think that is probably where we need to go. And I think that's going to take a little bit more time because that does involve having a lot of people behind the scenes, people who are content planning. And it's not just a case of, hey, we like the idea of covering this storyline, let's send someone out with a camera. There's a lot of thought, a lot of pre-event filming, a lot of editing that goes into producing even one of those. And then, of course, you have to flip that into, right, what's the maximum and minimum amount of downtime we're likely to see throughout the course of a day? How much content do we need? How much time does it need to fill? And how frequently should we be showing this to the audience? So there are a lot of questions to answer, but it's slowly coming together. And one day, possibly soon, it'll get to a point where we can very accurately predict, in terms of linear programming, what how an esports broadcast would comfortably fit into a TV channel. And all of this doesn't talk about the elephant in the room, which is in 5 years' time. Is most TV programming still going to be linear? Is everything going to be on demand? Are the Netflixes of the world, for example, going to be overtaking the traditional medium of broadcast TV? Trend certainly looks like that kind of media consumption is picking up. Whether or not it will dominate still remains to be seen.
Of course, I'm going to leave that point for now and kind of try to dig into more in terms of the adaptation part, or more so, how we can really adapt for that linear style of broadcasting. Do you feel like having an audience who might just randomly tune into the channel one day, see Overwatch, not really have any idea what's going on, do you feel like that additional aspect of that group of real new players affects your casting style, and how do you feel like casters can better adapt to make the game more presentable and more understandable to a wider audience?
Haha, I feel the same way whenever I turn on the TV or an online broadcast and see American football, and I'll probably still continue to feel like that for a very long time. I think it's a problem shared by basically all professional sports. We need to break out of, I say break out, we kind of already have, to be honest, but we need to make people aware that our mentality of casting esports is not so that the person who spends 8 hours a day watching or playing a game can tune into the broadcast and be entertained and be filled with technical tidbits he or she didn't know 100% of the time. And we have to have those play-by-play color combinations that allow people from a newer background who have no idea what's going on the ability to see into the game at a superficial level and appreciate the entertainment that it's giving us. The tricky thing about this from an esports point of view is, traditionally, because esports broadcasting was so niche, people have grown accustomed to very highly technical streams that talk to the hardcore fan base, and everyone's really happy because it's super technical and super cool, and that's great, and you get a lot of technical casters who do this really well, but it doesn't necessarily transfer that well over to a brand new audience that you're trying to lure into the game. And ultimately, if you're trying to get double the number of people playing a game next year than you are this year, the most important part of that is going to come from the people who are able to speak to the newer audience and capture their attention and capture their excitement. So there's a balance that needs to be struck, but I think all on-screen talent, whether you're a host, color, play-by-play, interviewer, everyone needs to understand that at times everyone will have to wear both of those hats.
Yeah, of course. And looking at kind of, I guess, our casting crew or casting staff, we actually, in Overwatch, we actually are blessed with the fact that we have a lot of different variety from a lot of different places. Huck was as a current StarCraft 2 pro. Stir came from TF. T Squared, who casted a few tournaments. There's actually an old Halo pro as well. And obviously, we have, from Face It, we have the likes of Machine and DDK. And of course, from Overwatch, we do have, Jason Kaplan, D-Man, and Uber Shouts, all of which who have very, very varied backgrounds in terms of different games that they've casted. We definitely a lot of combination of Counter Strike and League of Legends that mixed in there as well. How do you feel this variety and the casting and play by play really helps Overwatch?
I don't think it necessarily helps or detracts so much as whether Overwatch suits a particular casting style. So, for example, I come from a StarCraft 2 background where a lot of my casts in years gone by would be in games where there's plenty of downtime at the start of the game, and there's a lot of time to sort of develop these storylines throughout the course of a single game because there's plenty of time to fill and plenty of interesting points that we can bring up and we can analyze in a much greater detail. Overwatch is extremely fast paced. There's no denying that the era of casters who are more used to, for instance, Quake and other games that are similarly fast paced, will, if that was their comfort zone, they'll find it again here to an extent. But there are also plenty of casters who might do play-by-play at a slower level from other games who come into Overwatch and feel it's a breath of fresh air as well. So it's really difficult to stand here and say, oh, because of the background this or that caster has come from, they'll be particularly well or not well suited to Overwatch. My honest answer would be seeing how much they enjoy the game and how much they feel it suits their style. I've often found that if I'm coming in talking about something, like it's 10 times easier to talk about it when I do actually like it that much. To use a little bit of an esports meme, it is true when they say the passion is real. It helps so much, and you find things to say in a much quicker period of time. You pick up on things that you might not have otherwise done, and when the game suits somebody and they love it, it becomes very apparent very quickly. I think it's great that Overwatch has a variety of casters and players, don't forget, coming from all sorts of backgrounds. I mean, we have pro StarCraft players coming into Overwatch, as well as all the old FPSs. We have MOBA players here as well, and people completely new to the esports scene. All of them are playing together on professional teams. This is all fantastic stuff, and it should be celebrated. Overwatch is basically diversity central of the esports right now. Whether or not I want to credit that diversity with the game's success, I'm not 100% sure how it correlates, but I'm very happy the game's successful. I'm very happy it's as diverse as it is, and I definitely won't want to change it.
Yeah, and I honestly agree with you. I think that the large plethora and just how many different people have kind of come together really does honestly build a really strong community from a lot of different esports games and esports titles in that aspect. So looking forward to BlizzCon, the Overwatch World Cup has kind of been something which a lot of people. I think there's a general mixed reception to it, where on one side you have people who love the idea. I personally love the idea. I think it's a great way to build exposure. I think it's really highlighting a lot of talent that isn't always broadcasted, people who don't necessarily play on pro teams. But on the other side, obviously, because it's not like a very competitive format based on the way that the voting has kind of been done, where it's popularity contests for captains who in then turn pick additional other players. What is your take on the Blizzard World Cup or the BlizzCon World Cup coming up?
So the Blizzard World Cup, I'm gonna take my casting hat off and put my digital marketing cap on for a second here, because I think the Overwatch World Cup has the potential to be a fantastic success, and it 99% comes down to how Blizzard chooses to market it. Like you said, there are plenty of people on pro teams, not on pro teams, that are going to be playing together that will have limited time to play together before the event as well. Um, so, in terms of quality of games, I'm not expecting the World Cup to be anywhere close to the level that we've seen in E-League Face It, at the Atlantic Showdown, or other major tournaments. But that's also not the point. I think what we have to remember and what we have to focus on for the World Cup is about building the stories about where all of these players come from, what their backgrounds have been, following them in their life on the lead up to BlizzCon, and you will have you're going to have your seagulls, your IDDQDs, and I mean I could name like 20 super famous players that have been gracing all of these tournaments, but frankly that doesn't matter because you can put six ridiculously good pros together who have never played together before because they're on six different pro teams, and they might be some of the best players in the world, but without that teamwork and coordination, which is so critical in Overwatch, they might not win the tournament. They'll stand a good chance, sure, but it's absolutely not guaranteed. So a lot of this comes down to Blizzard showcasing just how accessible the game is, how great it is to be able to sit down and play with your friends, even playing with strangers that you've never met before. And the World Cup will be about having people from different nations, who don't normally play together, coming together to celebrate the diversity, the funness, and the versatility of the game, and just enjoying themselves on the big stage. And this needs to be communicated over and above everything else. It's not about the quality of the games, which will be good as well. It's not about the level of competition, which hopefully is to be seen, but I think will be good as well. It's about the stories of the people who got there and about the bonds and friendships that form when they actually arrive at BlizzCon.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think this was a very safe first choice. I think people keep on forgetting that Overwatch only came out like realistically a few months ago. It's literally the first time it's been at BlizzCon, so I think Blizzard is inherently being a little on the safer side by hosting a tournament, which is more, exposure based and more like kind of drawing more people into the game and more perhaps, reflecting on the stories. But like you said, it's all about how they spin it. On a not so serious question, but still pretty serious question, how do you feel that the release of um, World of Warcraft's Legion really does kind of affect the Overwatch craze going into BlizzCon?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I'm the most qualified to answer it, but my gut feeling would be that people who have enjoyed playing World of Warcraft and are very excited to have a new expansion come out will obviously be playing a lot of Legion. And will that mean that that audience plays a little less Overwatch? Sure, but I'm relatively convinced that the two audiences for the games are reasonably distinct. If somebody happens to like both WoW and Overwatch, I'm not convinced that the release of Legion will cause them to dump Overwatch as a game. Far from it. I think they'll just have two games to enjoy and more power to them. So, will it affect hype levels? Of course it will. Legion's a new game. It'll be drawing a lot of crowds to BlizzCon as well. I don't actually think, though, that it would dumb down the level of hype that Overwatch is getting.
Yeah, of course. So if anyone wants to get into casting, let's say like a new person in the scene wants to go and create his own brand and stuff like that, what would be some tips you could give to, towards of like working, starting to become a caster or starting to improve on their current casting?
Come into casting with a purpose. I enjoy building relationships and bringing the stories to people that they wouldn't otherwise see purely based on gameplay itself. I like to talk about player backgrounds, what people are going through at tournaments. I often credit a lot of the backroom staff who basically don't get a mention, but I'm putting 99% of the work in. I really enjoy a lot of behind the scenes stuff and people who are passionate about making the scene what it is, rather than just focusing on the games itself. That's me personally how I enjoy. There are plenty of casters who are 110% focused on making sure the level of gameplay is as high as possible, and rightly or wrongly don't care about anything else. They just want to see the game played at an absolute tip top level. That's fine as well, but have what you're after and what you're about reasonably clearly defined. If someone asks you, why are you doing this? Make sure you have what you believe to be a very strong answer. And I would also personally, I wouldn't go into casting uh, with a focus on it being a career. I think people who are interested in voice training and coming into casting as a career, esports is a perfectly legitimate way to do it, but competition is high. Even though we're slowly becoming more mainstream, we still don't have as many jobs as TV and radio, where there are also plenty of opportunities to discuss, to develop very similar skills, and you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself into it too early. So I would be coming into it because you're passionate about it, you enjoy it, and you know what you want to get out of it. If you can answer those three things and not say, I want to cast esports because I want to be successful and be on camera, like to me, that latter answer is a very, very dangerous one.
Yeah, of course, and I think that that's oftentimes when people see the kind of the glamour of everything, hey, be on camera and being, part of the analyst desk. I think that's something people genuinely kind of lose in the track of everything, where they think that that's the main goal, but in reality is everyone on that desk has a different purpose, whether it be to expand storylines like you said, or provide, honestly they're passionate about providing analysts, or just educating people about the game and maybe bringing the same love to the game as they do themselves. So closing out the interview with a few small questions: who are your favorite casters to work with, and I guess attach that also, like, do you have any casters you specifically look up to?
So I think my standout experience, I have two standout experiences in terms of casting, um, and they both actually come from StarCraft. The first is I really, really enjoyed casting with Artosis. In fact, it was the WCS finals in Shanghai a number of years ago as well, because he was and still is one of the highest level technical analysts in the game, but he appreciates the importance of having good chemistry, of being able to keep the game accessible to people who are coming in and watching you for the first time. And what that meant for his casting style is that if there was a particularly complicated situation that he just about understood and his co-casters, such as myself, completely did not, he would lead his co-caster into asking the kind of questions that would suddenly make his play-by-play co-casters look like the best analysts on earth. He was very good at guiding the conversation so that the entirety of the production and the people he was casting with looked extremely intelligent and was able to convey to the audience what they needed to hear. So that for me is an absolute standout, and I wish, and I still aspire to having that skill, because I think very few casters are able to do what he does. Another fond memory I remember is the MLG Spring Championship in Anaheim, and I want to say that's possibly in 2013, but don't quote me there. It was a really enjoyable event. I was casting backstage with a number of other people as well, while there were other casters on the main stage. And out of nowhere, Day 9 shows up. So there were 6 or 7 of us casters backstage, and he had a massive grin on his face. We were in the middle of casting, and he ran through the entire area with his hand up, giving everyone high fives. He didn't even stop for a conversation. He was just like, "Wow, you guys are doing an awesome job back here. You rock." Ran through the area, gave everyone high fives, and then disappeared to do whatever he had to do next. And I thought, this guy just took the time to do that. I was actually just obviously I was in the middle of casting at the time, but I had a smile plastered on my face throughout the rest of the day. It was a really nice show there, I think, of just the passion going a little bit of an extra mile. So I do remember that very fondly.
Yeah, awesome. And that's obviously great to kind of hear those positive stories. And I hope that Overwatch can also provide some more in terms of production wise, positive stories and stuff like that. So, do you have any shout outs before we close out the interview?
I just want to say thank you, really, to you guys. Appreciate chatting to you today, and Blizzard for just continuing to make fantastic games after fantastic games. Overwatch is a real success story. If you haven't watched, by the way, the birth of Overwatch from the ashes of Project Titan, I highly recommend you guys check out those documentaries as well. Really inspiring. Thank you to FaceIt and E League for the opportunity to cast there. And hopefully, I'll see you guys at more events very soon. Just make sure to go ahead and keep up and follow me if you are so inclined on Facebook and Twitter. And as I've shown earlier on in this review, if you guys have any feedback or just want to have a chat, I'm always around.
Yeah, and also on my side, thank you for GosuGamers for hosting this chat, and obviously Face It and E-League for the Overwatch Open as well as further coverage that we might have. But it was great talking to you as well, and I definitely hope to see you on the desk or doing interviews behind the scenes, or hey, even like on site or on the lands very soon. And definitely looking forward to more of your content. So thank you. It was great talking to you, and I hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thank you very much.